Hey everybody, welcome to the Back to Brilliance podcast. We're your hosts Henry and Joseph. Thanks for tuning in. We ask that you subscribe or leave a comment or review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're going to get into today's episode. We're talking about how to cure the do-it-yourself disease. In this episode, we're going to provide you the blueprint for building a franchise prototype to achieve true wealth and freedom. You must transition from working in your business to working on your business. And we're going to break that down a little bit more of what we mean by that. So with that, I want to go ahead and bring on our co-host, Joseph. Joseph, say what's up and take it away.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I wanted to talk about pretty much just the I guess like the myth, right? The entrepreneurial myth, the book, but also the contents of it. Because I was watching a lot of Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, and so often the story of it is like, oh, I thought the business would run itself, but we're in debt, and we spend 16 hours a day working on our business, and we're in debt. And I was like, that's like a good example of an entrepreneur who wasn't ready to run a business, right? And they may be good at their craft, right? They may be good at making food or whatever, or managing people, but they're not good at managing their business. And so I was like, you know what? This reminds me of the E-Myth book. And so yeah, here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the entrepreneurial trap, that we fall into sometimes, right? Where, and this is what we're going to break down a little bit, about working on the business as opposed to working in the business. Sometimes we get started, we hit the road. We are just talking about this. You get started, you hit the road, and you start building out, your journey. But, a lot of times we don't put the systems in place that are going to keep us, in business for a long term, because, what happens is we're so excited. We kind of put the cart before the horse, and we just start running, so that kind of like puts us in that place, where we take that leap, and we just jump in, and we find out the hard way, so it's kind of, this book, the E-Myth, it breaks that down, so if you're starting out a business or you're in business and you're a little bit frustrated and you're not understanding why, it's because your systems are not in place. So a lot of times if you find yourself doing things over and over and over, and it's like, why am I in this loop? It's probably because you don't have a real system in place. You've been doing things one way, and those type of things can put you in a trap, and get you to a place where you're not actually growing.
Exactly. And something that is interesting, a lot of the time, or there is a lot of cases where an entrepreneur is built or born from being an employee for years. Let's say you're in roofing, right? You're a employee or a contractor for a business, and you're like, you know what, I could do it better. Or the food industry, right? Oh, I like food, I want to do food, or I want to make food, right? So that spirit is born from frustration a lot of the time, but then you kind of over romanticize what that actually looks like whenever you run your business, right? And so then you fall into the trap where again, in the example I gave, where you're overworked, underpaid, and things are not as smooth because you don't have a system in play, right? You got into business because you're like, oh, I heard everyone is starting their own business, sure, I'll do it too, right? Not knowing that there is an art to it, there is a process to it, and you're working on your business, or I'm sorry, you're working in your business, not on your business.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. A lot of us that start as entrepreneurs, we were once employees, and maybe you were doing everything at your job, right? You wore every hat. But, the thing that you weren't doing is the back end, the business stuff, you know what I mean? So this is what the company put in, and this is the stuff that sometimes if you don't learn it on the job that you're at, you're going to have to learn it on your own. So this is why the E-Myth is a really good book to, to start out on your journey. And again, if you already started and you're feeling frustration and you don't see growth results happening, it's because the systems, right? So and what do we mean? There's like two different skills, right? So it goes like this, like, while you can build or bake a great cake, that's not going to help you to run a great bakery. You know what I'm saying? So the pie or cake maker is, the worker. The bakery owner is, the entrepreneur who builds the business, right? So you have and sometimes the same person wears two different hats, right? You're the baker and you're the seller and all that stuff. So like you might have a great recipe, but the other part of business is if you're not, pricing things correctly, you don't have a system in place, where everything just flows nice and easy, it begins to put you behind, you know what I mean? So what we're talking about is just putting systems in place to help you to grow and, to work on your business. It's good, when you first start out, you got to put in that sweat equity, right? So you're going to learn by putting it into the business, but as soon as you're profitable, that's when you need to start working on the business and putting more into it, and you can get higher results.
Exactly. And in the example of the baker, right? Again, they know how to make a great product, but they don't know how to make a great system. And that is where the entrepreneurial, I guess adventure really begins, right? Whenever you're like, okay, well, I know how to make a cake, I know how to make it well, but I don't know how to make a lot of cakes well, or I don't know how to, put my name out there to make cakes for people, right? And so that's where all of that comes into play. And that's where, a lot of people, or, I keep saying a lot of people, but, there is a segment of people who, I kind of fell into this trap too, where, I was like, oh, well, I know how to make a good product. And so the product should sell itself, right? No, there's a whole system at play to sell that product and or service, right? And so, just realizing, okay, am I, deficient on the product or the system? And that will really tell you and really navigate you for where you want to go and how to improve.
Absolutely. So we call that the product pivot. It's the commodity versus the system, right? So the technician focuses, basically on the commodity, the product, whatever the service, and that's being sold to the customer. Where the system provides the actual delivery of that product or service. And there's two different elements to it. One, you take the ingredients, you build the cake, you make it look pretty, you do all that stuff. But the other side of business is how you present it, how you market it, how you solicit it out there to the audience, and then also the next part is, the customer service, right? So, we've all been there where we've gone to some places and the product is good, everything is good, but the customer service is poor, and it's not that, that the person is just a bad person, it's the training, so the systems that are in place by the management. When you go to, I'll give you an example, when you go to like Starbucks or Chick-fil-A, even if that person's having a bad day, they always put on a great, that smile. They always give you the best customer service because that's what they're trained to do. The training and the systems are in place, to give you the best experience there. You know what I mean? Even though that person may be having a bad day or whatever the case is. But so those are examples that we can learn from by the systems, to see them in action, so if you're in a position where you might have a great product or a great service, but you don't feel like it's moving, it's doing things, it's probably because the system that you have in place is not working. And what some of those things are is maybe your follow-up system isn't good. Maybe your outreach is not happening because, it's not working, so like these are the simple things that we can change, and this is kind of what this message is about. It's just helping you to pivot, and understand, like, moving from the technician, who works in the business, to the owner who works on the business.
Exactly. And, a great way to really think about it is breaking it down, a technician versus an entrepreneur, right? What boat do you fall into, and how can you kind of balance it out, right? And so, like, a technician, or like a doer, is, you want things done right, or, if you've ever said, if you want to do it right, do it yourself. They have a very strict mindset of like how things should be done on a technical perspective. You're probably a doer or a technician, right? And so, um, an entrepreneur or a visionary, they're very in the clouds, if you want to say, right? They look at the big picture. They look at like where things should be, where to go, how things should operate. That is all the entrepreneur visionary. So if you don't know where you're at, think about these things, and then you can really balance yourself out, right? I'm a big visionary, but I've really been trying to balance out my visionary to be more of a technician, because I know how to make a good product, but like sometimes the doing is like a very daunting task for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of this, like, technician versus entrepreneur, I'll share something with you guys here. Is when I first started out in my business, I was actually a technician by trade, so I would go to a lot of people's homes or businesses, and I carry on conversations with these business owners. So one day I went to this one business owner's home, and I was doing work, and they're like, "You're really good at this," and it was insulting but inspiring at the same time. So I hope this helps somebody that's hearing this. So they say, the reason why you're not growing and very successful as you could be is because you think like a technician. You don't think like a businessman. Man, that hit me between the eyes, guys. Like, that hit me. It hit my pride. It hit me like, who do you think you are? Don't talk to me like this. But that sat with me for a long time. You know what I mean? And I had two ways to go about it, right? Like, who do they think they are? And get bitter about it. But it really challenged me to, like, let me get better at this. Maybe there's something to that. That's true, So I was working in the business, and when I finally understood this and I read this book, I realized, what? I started my business. I put the cart before the horse. So I'm telling you from experience, and when I started to put systems in place, things changed, and it got to a point where, like, oh man, the money started rolling in faster and bigger because I understood, like, yeah, you're right. You have to put these systems in place. So it was a reality check for me. You know what I mean? And most times people don't grab that. They take it as insult. But I took it as inspiration. It took me a while to deal with it. But, as I got to it, I got to understand that, like, okay, this is how I can do these things, And, things change, of course, right? In life, we saw, like, during 2020 how they stopped the whole world. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, when you don't have a system in place and things aren't flowing, everything just completely can stop. So they shown that they can stop things at any time. But when you have systems in place, you can always pivot very easy, and you can continue to progress. So that's going to move us into our next topic, where we're talking about escaping that trap, and kind of building like a franchise prototype.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, now we're gonna get into like the working on your business versus in your business, right? And so, working on your business is improving the systems, improving your product, versus working in your business. It's very reactive, right? You're like, oh, I show up every day. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I show up every day, right? So that's working in your business. And so, really, the main perspective shift is, how can you run your business without your business, or without you running your business? Because if you're the only person that cares about your business or is able to really run your business, if something were to happen to you, or if you were to like, have a maybe a health scare or whatever, well, boom, your business is on hold or suspended or whatever the case may be. And so then you have to shift your mindset from how can I run my business to how can my business run.
Right. And that's the thing, working in your business is, you know, it always starts out like that. We always have to put, the effort in, get everything going off the ground. But when you have these systems in place, then you're able to start, delegating. I think that's the hardest thing in, business is delegating because, like we said earlier, if you want it done right, we got to do it ourselves. So you got to, build that system, train your people so that they understand and you can trust them, to carry it out. Another thing is part of working on your business is, setting time aside every week, for the inner entrepreneur on you that's within you, and building that up, keeping that growth process coming, because a lot of times when you get in the business and you're working, you just get so consumed by it that you stop growing, so I think that's one of the perspective shifts that have to take place. If you're always just working in the business, then you have no time to really work on the business. And eventually before long, you no longer just have a business. You just created yourself a job, and I've been there too. So I'm telling you from experience, when you stop learning, you stop leading. So the thing you want to do again is just continue to work on yourself and your team, because whatever you learn, you could teach to your team. And this is how you're going to be able to fire yourself from the business and actually have a business that could run without you.
Exactly, right. And so, that's kind of like building a prototype or building a system dependent model versus a people dependent model. Or like, how many people do you know that own a business and they're like, if I wasn't here, the lights would not be on, right? And that's a very scary thing to hear, because again, the whole business is built on you or built around you. And so, once you build a business, like you want to have a business that can maybe not run itself entirely, but that doesn't need you to be the owner, because again, like, you know, let's say Henry were to be like, oh, well, I don't want to run my business anymore, but I want to keep what I built going, right? And so now he has to build a business or change his model to be more dependent on a system that would run itself, or that doesn't need him, so tightly in control of it, for lack of a better term. But again, all of it is just to systematize everything, because like Henry says, I'm probably going to butcher it, but a system with no systems is a system built to fail, or something along those lines, right?
Exactly. So creating that franchise prototype, it doesn't mean you're going to go sell this off, but what it means is kind of like cookie cutter, right? That when people come in, they understand, and it's a template. So you're basically putting a template in place. That way everybody can follow. It's very easy to understand. And today with the tools that we have in place, like, there's so much that you can utilize, to streamline things, to make things a lot easier. So when you standardize the process, it just makes things a lot easier, and, one of the things that, like I said, that I've learned is when people don't know what to do, it's not their fault, right? It always comes back to leadership. So everything rises and falls on leadership. So if the business is not flourishing, it's not the employees, it's not, your suppliers, it's leadership. So this is why the E-Myth is in place, because, it's a great book, I should say, that you should implement in your place of business for every business, because the systems in it, is what's going to carry you through, so this is something, it took me a long time to learn. Like I said, I was already doing business for probably, I don't know, 8-10 years when I finally read this book, when that client of mine's told me I was probably in business maybe a year and a half, 2 years. So in the beginning, I was just trying to get as much clients as I could, and I didn't know any better because, again, I came from an employee background and I had to learn. So it took me a long time to learn. So a lot of this stuff that we're telling you is trial and error. And I like to tell you my errors so that way I can save you time. You know what I mean? So I try to point you to the right direction. Like, don't waste your time doing this. Go do that instead, because it works. So I'm telling you, like, this system, building this, franchise prototypes, it works. And also it provides you an opportunity. So when you're ready to scale or exit, everybody knows what's going on and how to handle, all the operations.
Exactly, and the biggest thing is to make it repeatable, right? Because that's basically what a system is. It's just a way to make things as clear and concise. That way, it's repeatable, right? That's all. That's all like a robot does, right? If you're in a factory or whatever, a factory robot, all it is just trying to repeat the same process over and over and over and over again. And again, businesses are the same way, right? If you have a good system, then you're able to scale because you're not focusing on, oh, what's my next step? I don't like that. I don't like this, right? And so, if you build it to with a system, then you're built to scale. And this is kind of like the last point that we have, which is like, the ultimate purpose of your business should be, that your business should serve your life and the people around you, and not your life should be around serving your business, right? And so it's that mindset shift of my business should be a benefit to me and not me being a benefit to my business.
Absolutely. So, getting that machine to be on automatic pilot, so that when you that's the whole goal. You know what I mean? And a lot of times some people just don't get it. They stay stuck in their 30, 40, and I have some clients that are 80, 90 years old still in the business, you know what I mean? Because, they never delegated, they never grew it. So, are they prosperous? Yes, but they can't. They're never going to retire. So it's up to you. We just give you the tools, and it's up to you to implement or to neglect. Your choice. But in this is we're explaining how to cure the do-it-yourself disease and how to get into that franchise prototype. To avoid that entrepreneurial trap. That keeps us enslaved in working in the business as opposed to working on the business, and learning, becoming the doer and learning, implementing the systems in place. And like I said, keep learning, keep learning so you can keep leading. People like to follow people who have a direction and a sense of purpose and know where they're going, So with that, I want to bring Joseph back on if he has any final thoughts before we close it out.
Yeah, again, I just want to say like pretty much what we said earlier, but it your business should not be a detriment to you. It should not be a something that you're dreading to do. It should be something that you're looking forward to do because it gives you purpose. And it's very easy to get lost in your daily operations, and it's hard to see the forest from the trees, or whatever the saying is, right? And so just take a step back and try to be like, okay, well, what am I lacking, or what trait should I pick up on? And so that will tell you all you need to know. All you need to know.
Absolutely. And with that, guys, put these tools in place, and they'll help you through your journey, and again, if you're stuck and you don't know, you're not alone. Reach out, find a community, join a community, and put yourself in that position so that way you can experience some growth and this is the time right now, you know, especially the way things are going in business and stuff like that. A lot of people, you know, you could see the change, you know, it's here, and a lot of people are just kind of like lost. What do I do? You know, and I think it comes down to really to the fact that you know, they just don't really have the systems in place, so they're just kind of going with the motions, you know, and you don't want to do that, you know. So again, we encourage you to join an entrepreneurship. Joe, you want to shout out the community?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you know, like Henry said, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, tired of doing everything alone, we have a community that combines practical self growth tools as well as community support and weekly structure to help you stay focused and help you follow through with whatever you're trying to do. So that's at backtobrilliance.com. If you scroll down to our community section, you'll be linked up with like-minded people like you.
Well said. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to our podcast. We appreciate it. Don't forget, please hit that subscribe button, leave a comment or review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're out. Till the next time, stay blessed.
Bye-bye.